going to try and post it on either my YouTube channel or you can ask me for the link. So question 8 on the practice test that you have.
We can't hear you.
Okay. Thank you for letting me know. Can you hear me now? Nope. Okay.
No, still pretty quiet.
Okay. Thank you. All right. How about now?
No.
Could you get any louder? I mean, barely.
Key.
I don't know what is the recording.
How about now?
Yes.
That's good.
Much better.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what happened. My microphone decided to die out, so I'm back on the computer's microphone. So, all right. So 5 micrograms per kilogram per minute, 70 kilogram patient, 400 milligrams per 250 ml for the dopamine question 8. All right. So the way you would solve this is you start off with the patient's weight, 70 kilograms, and you're going to multiply it by the 5 micrograms kilogram per minute, and you'll get 350 micrograms per minute. Now the trick to this question is you have milligrams here and you have micrograms here. You cannot do math, at least you can't do interconversion units without them being the same. So you can't do a calculation without them both being milligrams or both being micrograms. So for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to go ahead and convert this to the 0.35 milligrams. And all I did is move my decimal point 3 to the left per minute. Then, now I can do the conversion of going from milligrams to milliliters. So it tells me I have 400 milligrams. I have 250 milliliters. And the last step is I need to convert minutes to hours. I'm just going to multiply by 60 to account for that. Now, I do these questions using dimensional analysis just because that's my preferred way of showing it to you guys, and then also being able to explain what I'm doing through that. So the only step that was a little bit, or at least at this point, that should be considered the tricky step is that you have the 350 micrograms you have to convert to milligrams, or you can convert the 400 milligrams to micrograms. Whichever one you do, as long as they're both the same, is the correct way to do that.
Why did you flip 250 and 400?
Okay, so that's a really good question. So I flipped it because I need to eliminate milligrams. You're saying the same thing. If I tell you there's 400 milligrams in 250 mLs, I can also say in 250 mLs, there's 400 milligrams. So you're saying the same thing. So you can put one on the top or the bottom, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So that's how you handle that. So you don't need to, it's not locked in that position. You can flip them as needed.
So how exactly would we know how to do that, at least on my part, like during the actual test? It seems like a lot of them are just, the other one, is it like where you're not having to flip them? Is it just trying to make sure the dimensional analysis lines up pretty much?
Well, yeah, that's always the case. So
yeah,
you've actually, anytime, so the entire time you guys have been doing dosage calc, you've been flipping things. So let me give you an example that's different than this. So let's say you are ordered 500 milligrams of, let's just say, a particular antibiotic, okay? And it's available in 250 milligrams per capsule. Or, just to kind of keep it consistent with what we're doing here, so instead of per capsule, let's just say per 5 milliliters. So if I was going to, you probably already instinctively know what you're going to do with that information. You're just going to divide by 250, multiply by 5. So that's ordered over half times quantity. And that's exactly what you're doing. What all I told you to do in this other step was just to organize it the same way. I put what I had, the 250 milligrams, and then 5 ml. You can switch it however you like, as long as they stay together, meaning that the numbers stay together, just that they're either one's on the numerator, one's on the denominator, however you want to organize that. So yeah, if you're using dimensional analysis, that's exactly what you want to be doing. If you're doing desired over have, I would say you're not going to, you could still do this problem, question 8, using ordered over have times quantity. You just got to make sure you account for the weight of the patient.
All right. When I did that with the order over have, I wasn't getting it. That's why eventually I just tried flipping it to try it that way, but I wasn't able, even with the converting with the weight, I don't think I was able to get it without doing that flipping, though I understand the concept. But
okay, do you want to see how to do this with the ordered over have?
I'm sure, I guess. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but
no, that's
I didn't know.
I've learned over the years that most people, that's what they do. If you prefer that style, you can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to erase what I wrote down here.
Just one quick question. Why did you have to multiply this by 60 minutes? Why is this because it has to be in hours, the infusion rate? Or...
Yes. Flow rate is always in milliliters per hour, and then drop rate would always be in drops per minute.
Drop rate is in drops per minute, and flow rate is in what?
Milliliters per hour.
I got it. Here it just says what rate. How would I guess I hope it's not a stupid question. Here it says what rate, so how do I know if they need a drop rate or flow rate?
So you actually know the answer to this question. In order to calculate a drop rate, you need a drop factor, and there's no drop factor in this question. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense.
Yeah, so it's not a dumb question. It's actually a very good question, but that would be my argument as to why you wouldn't calculate a drop factor, because they would have told you either the drop factor or they would have told you the tubing that was being used. So that's how you know whether or not to use milliliters per hour or drops per minute.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so the first thing is you would just take I'm still on my eraser. You have to account for the patient's weight first and foremost before you do any ordered over have. So let's just say you wrote it out like this. Okay, it doesn't really matter as long as you got to this point. Once you get to the 350 micrograms per minute, I'm just going to write it like this. What you need to do is you still need to convert micrograms to milligrams. You still need to get to that point before you can do your desired over half. Once you have the 0.35 milligrams, so that would be the 0.35 milligrams per minute, now you can divide by the 400 milligrams you have times your quantity of 250 milliliters. Once you do that, you're going to get some sort of answer that's in per minute. So you still need to also account for and multiply this by 60, whatever your answer is. I'm going to advise you to do it here, then answer the question.
Okay. Yeah, I must have, when I first did it, not done the 60 as well.
Right,
so.
yeah. That was, somebody said that earlier. They said that when they did this, they had, I think the answer was like some sort of decimal answer. And then they had a lot of decimals as they were going through this. And so, yeah, if you didn't multiply by 60, your number was quite too small.
But like she said, if it's going to ask for a rate, we just would always pretty much multiply by 60, right? Because that's how it's going to be milliliters per hour.
Only if it's only if it starts in per minute. So if this said 5 micrograms per kilogram per hour, then you would just leave it alone. You wouldn't convert it. So you wouldn't multiply by 60 all the time, only if it's in minutes as a starting point. Good questions. All right, so to do this question, this is actually a really good question where desired over have works. So you're going to take your 420 cc's over the 120 cc's times your hour in this instance. So what is 420 divided by 120?
3.5.
3.5.
All right, hold on one second.
Okay.
So I think you said 3.5.
Yes.
So 3.5 hours, what would that be in hours and minutes?
3 hours and 30 minutes.
3 hours, 30 minutes. Got it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
So simple. Thank you.
And you're welcome. And I do believe that's how that question would be asked. It can get a little bit hairy where you can get down to like the quarter hour. And honestly, then you would have something like this, 3.25. You just need to remember that 0.25 of an hour is 15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think that I don't think you're going to necessarily see that beyond that. I think it'll be something like the 3 hours, 30 minutes. And then for this 3.25 would be 3 hours and 15 minutes. There's some fancy math that I can show you on how to get the exact time, even down to like the minute. So like you could get it down to like 4 hours and 13 minutes. But if I recall, when I wrote these tests, I didn't do anything like that because that's just an aggravation.
Okay.
Plus, you guys know exactly when the infusion is going to stop. It's when the alarm goes off. It's when the monitor is flashing. And most likely it's when you're at home and someone else is doing it.
There you go.
Any other questions?
Can we do number 16 also?
You just need to tell me what it is because I don't have the practice test that you have.
Okay. An IV of 500 milliliters of D5W is to infuse at 120 milliliters per hour. The drop factor of the tubing is 15 drops per milliliter. What is the drop rate in GTT per minute?
How many of you tried to solve this by using the 500 milliliters?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, good. So when we talk about flow rate, I don't care about the quantity. Okay. I only care about the rate. So the analogy I use is, let's say we're both at CCAC and we're both going to go to Kennywood and you're going to be driving an Aston Martin and I'm driving a Mercedes Benz. If you're going 60 miles per hour and I'm going 30 miles per hour, it doesn't matter what vehicle I'm in, you're going to get there twice as fast as I'm going to get there because it's all about the rate. Doesn't matter the strength, doesn't matter what's in it. That just tells us what's there. So to solve any flow or drop rate question, you need two pieces of information. You need the flow rate and you need the drop factor.
Good for you. Why did you turn on the red light? And the boy.
What?
Why did you turn on the red light?
So I don't think that was pertaining to us. So, all right. So flow rate is typically in milliliters per hour. Drop factor will always be given to you as drops per milliliter. In the event you're on an NCLEX or some other test, or you're at another campus and you get asked and it tells you that you're using a microtubing, most likely it's 60 drops per milliliter, just for your own knowledge. So I have 120 milliliters per hour times 15 drops per milliliter. And then the problem I have here is that it's in hours. I need it in minutes. So what I'm going to advise you to do is, you can tell, you already know the answer to this. 1 hour is what? 60 minutes, right? You just swap that in. So 120 over 60 is 2 times 15 gives you 30 drops per minute. If you're trying to do desired over have with flow rate problems, it's not going to work, because usually there's nothing that you're dividing by. Or ordered over have. I'm sorry. I keep saying desired over have because that was an old way in which it was presented.
Thank you.
And I have a feeling you did this, you would have did this just fine if you just ignored the 500 milliliters.
Yeah, that was tripping me up.
Yep. Any other questions?
Number 22 for me.
Okay, and you just got to tell me what 22 says.
Okay, so it is IV heparin to infuse at 750 units an hour. The solution strength is 25,000 units in 1 liter of D5W. Calculate the flow rate in ml.
You cut off, but is that what you need, milliliters per hour?
Yeah, to calculate the flow rate in ml.
Okay. So this, you're gonna what I do when I do these questions. Okay, that's my question. All right. When you do this question, what I do is I decide what I'm going to start with. Okay. So how I rationalize this is I'm going from one rate, units per hour, to another rate, milliliters per hour. So I start with the rate. Okay. You get to decide what you want to start with. So if you do something different, you're fine. This one you can do the the ordered over have, and I'll show you to do that. But I'm going to show you the dimensional analysis way first. So I have 750 units per hour. I don't want units. I want milliliters per hour. So I want to get rid of units. I want milliliters. I have 25,000 units, and I have 1,000 milliliters. Did you know that 1 liter is 1,000 milliliters? When I do that, 750 times 1,000 divided by 25,000 is your answer. If I was going to do the ordered over have, I would do the 750 units per hour divided by the 25,000 units times the 1,000 milliliters. If you do that, you'll also come up with the same answer. And as I'm going through any of these, if any of these, like what I'm writing out, if it doesn't make sense, let me know. If I can clarify something, let me know.
I have a question, but
Yes.
it's on the website. about the Heparin Protocol.
Sure.
Can you please walk it out?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so the first thing about the Heparin protocol is to know that the only thing I can change is the patient's weight and the patient's weight and the APTT. Everything else is the same. When you do a Google search for the Heparin protocol, that's the protocol, steps 1 through 15. Now, if you don't have this in front of you, I'm just going to try and walk you through it, but I will, I'll just tell you everything that I'm doing as I'm doing it. So for a Heparin protocol question, it usually starts off as, at least the example I give you is we start off with a patient that weighs 110 pounds. We need to convert that patient's weight to kilograms, which is 50 kilograms. Now, this is another question where you could, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to do the order over halves, so I'm going to show you this again in dimensional analysis. But if you're getting the right answers, doing these however you're doing them, then you're doing it right. I'm not here to tell you to do something different. The problem with the Heparin protocol is there's so many steps that are listed there, and it's hard to remember what you're using. And honestly, the thing is, you don't need to use every step of the protocol. You just need a few things. So if you don't have the Heparin protocol in front of you, I'm just going to write out, we'll do it in this color here. You need to pay attention to step 2, step 10, and then depending on what your APTT is, steps 11 through 15. So most likely in the examples that I've given you is you just pay attention to step 12. Okay? Again, if you don't have this in front of you, it's not going to make sense, but that's okay. All right, so the first thing, when you're answering this question, it has A, B, and then C, part 1 and part 2. A says to calculate how many milliliters to administer for the bolus dose. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the patient's weight, and the step 10 tells us that the bolus is 80 units per kilogram. Okay, so step 10 tells us what our initial is, which is the 80 units per kilogram. Again, I'm writing this stuff out because I don't know how many of you have that. And I know on the practice test that you guys have or you were given, you do not have the Heparin protocol listed.
Yeah.
So this equals 4,000 units. Then, looking at step 2 tells me 2 pieces of information. It tells me that I have 25,000 units of heparin in 250 mLs, and that I have 1,000 units per milliliter in my bolus. Okay, so this is the 25,000 per 250 ml is the IV, and the 1,000 units per ml is the bolus. Since we're calculating a bolus, that's the information I use. Every milliliter is 1,000 units, and I get 4 milliliters as my answer for the initial bolus dose of heparin. I like to highlight the things that are consistent. When you're doing this problem, you will, when you're doing this problem, you're always going to be using, for the bolus dose and for the initial bolus, you're going to multiply the patient's weight in kilograms by 80, and then you're going to divide by 1,000, and that will give you your answer for your initial bolus. For the drip is listed in step 10, and it says to start the drip at 18 units per kilogram per hour. Again, that's listed in the protocol. We take the patient's weight in kilograms times that 18 units, kilogram hour. So remember, this looks very similar to what you saw with the dopamine question where it said patient's weight, but it was micrograms per kilogram per minute. So it's just a variation where we have a unit, we have weight, and then we have time. It's the same type of question. So this is good practice. 50 times 18 is 900 units. We don't want units, we want milliliters per hour because that's what the question asks for. And so we use the information from step 2 that says that there's 25,000 units of heparin in 250 milliliters of half normal saline. So 25,000 units and 250 ml. And then we will get 9 milliliters per hour. Again, standards for my initial heparin drip or drop rate or flow rate is going to be there boxed in red. And this is the information I would always use for when I'm calculating flow rate. The other thing I'll tell you, just as an aside, this 250 over 25,000 is the same thing as 1 over 100. So if you're looking for a shorthand way to do this, when you calculate your bolus dose, divide by 1,000 when you get to units. When you are doing the flow rate, divide by 100 when you get to units per hour. All right, then there's 2 other parts, C1 and C2. C1 says after 43 seconds, after 6 hours, we retest the APTT and we see that it's 43 seconds. 43 seconds, we go back to the protocol and we look at the APTT times that are indicated in steps 11 through 15. Step 12 is the range for the 43 seconds, and it says to do 2 things. It says to rebolus the patient, but this time with 40 units per kilogram, and then to increase the drop or the infusion rate by increasing it by another 2 units per kilogram per hour. So the first question is, what is the new bolus? So I'm going to take my 50 kilograms. We're talking about the same patient. This time we're going to rebolus with the 40 units. 50 times 40 is 2,000 units. Again, once we get to units, it's just a matter of dividing by 1,000. But what tells me to do that is just using the bolus dosage strength, which is the 1 per 1,000 units. And then we get an answer of 2 milliliters. If you were just to divide your answer, the 4 milliliters initially, by 2 milliliters, you would have been doing that correctly. Okay? Again, highlighting what is standard, or constant, I guess. The only thing that is really different is obviously patient's weight and in kilograms. Okay. Then part 2 is we increase the infusion rate by 2 units per kilogram per hour. So what that means is I need to pay attention to what my initial infusion rate was set at. My initial infusion rate was set at 18 units per kilogram per hour. So it tells me to increase that by 2 units per kilogram per hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 50 kilograms. I'm going to multiply now with 18 plus 2, which is 20 units per kilogram. That will give me 1,000 units per hour. And then since we're talking about the infusion, we're talking about the IV, so I need to reprogram my pump, and I do so by taking the IV information, which is the 250 ml and the 25,000 units of heparin, 1 over 100. You get 10 milliliters per hour. Notice that I use for my flow rate, and for my bolus, I use this information for the bolus, so that was consistent. And then for the flow rate, I use this information. Those 2 things I use consistently for when I'm calculating rate or when I'm calculating bolus. Just don't make sure you don't use the wrong unit when you're doing those calculations. like I said, to my knowledge, you will have a question like this on your test. The difference will be the patient's weight. And then when you also get asked the question, you will either be asked just A and B or just parts 1 and parts 2 for the C. You won't get both. I gave you 2 questions built into one just for additional practice. So I just want you to know that when you see that, that's how that would be presented to you.
Okay, I get confused on C2, like where you have the 250 milliliters over 2,500 units, 25,000 units. Sorry, that's where I get confused. Why did you use that word?
So I'm using that because when I have an infusion, it's connected to the IV, right? And so the IV bag that's connected to the patient is that 250 milliliters, half normal saline that contains the 25,000 units. So all I'm doing is changing how quickly I'm adding in, or how quickly I'm infusing the heparin. So basically I'm increasing it. And so since we're talking about changing the flow rate, meaning changing the thing that's connected to the patient, the dial or the screen, that's why you use that, because that's what's connected to the patient. The bolus is just an injectable that you can add in at any given point, but the infusion rate is something that is connected to the IV, and so that is why you use the IV bag.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I have a feeling you guys have done this enough in your clinicals that you understand why you would use that information, because it's the bag. Like the bolus is not connected to the patient. It's not on their IV. It might be a piggyback that you just add on, but I have a feeling like the way I imagine it is it's a vial sitting off to the side. You withdraw the vial, you withdraw the quantity from the vial and inject it into the port in the IV, and then it gets entered into the patient's bloodstream. But then we can change the infusion rate by either increasing or decreasing it based off of what the protocol tells us to do.
Hey, I was wondering about rules for rounding up answers that end up in milliliters.
You got it. So, so first of all, I think that's Steve Large. So good to hear. I recognize your voice, buddy. When you're rounding, the rules for rounding are, especially for things like this, like the 4 milliliters, the 9 milliliters, you would round to the nearest tenth when it's a number greater than 1. If it's a number smaller than 1, you would only round to the nearest hundredth place. As an example, so I'm going to, is it okay if I clear off the Heparin Protocol? Does anyone have any additional questions about the Heparin Protocol?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I copied it already.
Okay, perfect. All right. So let's say I have something that, and this could even be with the Heparin Protocol. Let's say I got something that was 3.75 milliliters, and then I would round that to 3.8 milliliters because I would round to the nearest tenth. If I had 0.75 milliliters, I would leave that as 0.75 milliliters, because a number less than 1, we would round to the nearest hundredth. Is that what you're asking me, Steve?
Yeah, so on our study guide, there was number 8 ended with 13.125 milliliters an hour. If it's a flow rate, are you rounding different?
Okay, so if you got 13.125 milliliters per hour, the way I would do this is, I don't know in reality if you can actually set a decimal in the infusion rate, but if I were answering this question, I would say that you would round it to the nearest tenth and do 13.1 milliliters per hour. In reality, oh, go ahead.
It was number 8 and the number 11 was, the answer ended up being like, it was like 6.666. which you would round up to just 6.7, right?
Correct.
So I was running through, the answer they gave us for number 8 was 13.125, but if I did round it up to just 13.1, that would technically be right.
Right. So you're saying the key said 13.125?
Yeah.
Okay. So it shouldn't have said that. The key should say 13.1. Yeah, you wouldn't do down to the thousandths place for anything that would be on an infusion. And I'm doubtful that it would even be at a decimal for an infusion, but given the math bubble that we're in, we can assume that it can get down to the 10th. So still follow your rounding rules. It may have just been a mistake in the key.
Yeah, I think I just got confused because the key contradicted the rules, and I wasn't sure about like the fundamental rules then, but this kind of clears it up.
Okay, good. Yeah, I would say still follow the fundamental rules that you're already aware of, and you're right. I don't know why the key was miskeyed in that specific way. The only thing is because I did create the test that you're looking at, I just don't have a copy of it because it was created, and I don't know where it went and who received it. But I know that based off of the questions, I recognize them. And so I may have keyed it differently because I wasn't exactly sure what they wanted, meaning your instructor, and then I just left it up to them to update the rounding. But the correct answer should be 13.1.
Okay, and then on our study guide, there's no like Heparin protocol questions.
Okay, so and then I'm gonna post this here again. 1 second. So if you go to the link that I'm sharing right now in the chat, that will pull up my version of the practice test that you should have, and then you'll see the Heparin protocol. Or if you still have your chapter or your third semester test, practice test, it's the same Heparin protocol.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. I highly recommend practicing it because, like I said, as far as I know, you do have the Heparin protocol on your test next week. Hopefully I'm wrong, especially if you don't like doing it.
Yeah, hopefully you are. Please.
But I will say that in your blueprint for fourth semester, it does list a Heparin protocol question. I will say this though, the questions that you are practicing, the practice test that you have, I actually think that's a harder version of what you'll probably see next week. And so if you're doing well on it, then that's a good sign. It means you understand the concepts and everything.
I was also wondering, where did you send the blueprint? With the blueprint, I'm just following the blueprint that the nursing department follows, is what I meant. So I didn't. Okay,
I
thought I saw it somewhere. I don't remember if they emailed us one or.
They probably did. I'm just looking to see if I have it. They may have emailed you the blueprint, or the blueprint might be in your packet.
Okay.
Any other questions? As a reminder, remember when you're doing basic unit conversions, meaning like going from milligrams to micrograms or milligrams to grams or milliliters to liters or liters to milliliters, do not round those. Do not round those. You will round going from pounds to kilograms, and you can round when you're going from like tablespoons to milliliters or teaspoons to milliliters or milliliters to ounces. Or ounces to milliliters, I should say. you can round those, but do not round when you're with it. Like when you're in the metric system and you're just doing a basic metric conversion, usually it's the first 4 or 5 questions. Do not round those numbers.
Can I read number 11 to you?
Absolutely.
It just says your patient has congestive heart failure and is ordered furosemide 200 milligrams IV daily. The available dose is furosemide 100 milligrams IV. The label reads furosemide 30 milligrams per ml. How many milliliters of the drug will you give?
Okay.
And
So the order was 200 milligrams?
your patient has congestive heart failure and is ordered furosemide 200 milligrams IV daily, yes.
Okay. So this is another example of where there's extra information. So they're just telling you like how the furosemide is available. So you don't need to worry about that information there, the 100 milligrams, okay? All you need to worry about is the 200 milligrams that was ordered and then the 30 milligrams per milliliter. So if you're gonna do ordered over half, you will order 200 milligrams, and then because you're calculating the milliliters, you divide by the 30 milligrams times the 1 milliliter. That would be your answer.
So is it almost the opposite of the one you said before, where you said you didn't want the initial one with the rate, but this one there, you don't need like the have, because I did the usual like desired over have for that one.
So for this one, the only reason that the have would be, so this is, I'm going to use different terminology to kind of illustrate this. So if I told you that the order was for 200 milligrams of something that came in 100 capsules, and it was 25 milligrams per capsule, I don't care that the thing has 100 capsules in it. It's just extra information. And that's what the 100 milligrams is telling you. It's just something that would be on the label. You're just not seeing the label. And so it's just extra information. So the difference here is, like, if I was doing a flow rate question, I would have like some sort of time. But since they're asking you for the volume, you want to use the variable that gives us the volume. I have a feeling this 100 milligrams is more representative of like it's a powder, and then we created a reconstitution, and that reconstitution is equivalent to 30 milligrams per milliliter, and then we just do the order over half to get to the desired milliliter.
So again, you're just dividing those milligrams out to just ultimately get to milliliters.
Correct.
And then
Yeah,
you always just want to go with, again, with maybe you should not use that terminology, but going with ordered, because there's the 200 and the 100 there to like know which one to use.
Right. So the 200 is the order. The 100 is the stock, but the concentration is the 30 milligrams per milliliter. And I think that's the differential.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
All right. Are there any other questions?
If we ran into any problems, how would we be able to just contact you? We have to set that up through like Appointment Central. Is that what they use again?
Yeah. Well, no. You can just email me directly.
Okay. And just use that email you have right there.
Yeah. So if you email me directly and you like for your, like I said, I don't have a copy of that test.
Okay.
At least I don't know where it is. I know that I created it. I just don't know where that test is to at least be able to see it with you. So if you just write out or even send me a screenshot of the question you're having trouble with, and I will help you out with that. No problem.
Okay, that's fine. And you're there like Monday all day just in case, because I think our thing's on Tuesday.
So I can't commit to being anywhere. Like, so I'm a practicing chiropractor. I'm in full-time practice on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And then I start lecture in the biology department on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But usually I can get away, get on my computer, and I will be checking for messages. So if you do have a question, I will try to address it. I just would say don't try and ask me a question at 11:59 on Monday night because I'm probably already in bed.
All right, that's fair. That's fine. Just wanted to make sure, even like over the weekend or something, if I sent something. But,
Yeah,
okay.
if you have something, I should get it, and then I'll respond. Just be patient, and I promise I'll get back to you as long as it's hopefully I just don't miss you, like, but I will respond.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome.